Hi everyone and welcome to the Helper Medic. Today is episode 2 of our series, How to Interpret a 12-lead ECG, where we'll be discussing the P-wave. In the first episode, we discussed the general principles of analyzing an ECG, as well as the steps and systematic approach you take to each ECG that you look at. If you missed the first episode, I'll put a link to that down in the description. If you're enjoying the series and you want to see more of this kind of content, subscribe to the channel, leave a like and a comment. And if you want PDF notes on the topics that we discuss, as well as live video tutorials with me on a regular basis, consider supporting the channel via the Patreon. So remember the steps we spoke about in analyzing an ECG, right? We said it was rate, rhythm, then P-wave, PR interval, QRS complex, ST segment, and T-wave. Now today we're only going to talk about the P-wave, the first part of the wave, which corresponds to atrial contraction, right? Now, a normal P-wave is generated by the sinoatrial node, or the SA node, which is located in the right atrium and is usually called the pacemaker of the heart. So at regular intervals, the SA node sends out impulses to both atria, right? And that's what we call the P-wave. What we see as this little upward deflection on the ECG is actually the path of the electricity flowing from the SA node through the atria and towards the atrioventricular node, or AV node, in the septum. To assess the P-wave, we look at one specific lead of the ECG, and that is standard lead 2. Now there are 4 questions we can ask to assess whether the P-wave is normal, and to do that we have to answer the questions by looking at standard lead 2. So question 1 is there P-wave present? Because if there's no P-wave present, then there's obviously already something wrong. So in certain conditions like atrial fibrillation, you won't see any P-waves. You'll just see a squiggly mess. And by that you already know that there is no P-wave, so something's not right. And if there is a P-wave, then you can say, okay, there is a P-wave. We'll move on to question 2. Question 2 is the P-wave upright in standard lead 2? Because if the P-wave is upright, then you can confidently say that the pacemaker for the heart is located somewhere in the atria. And so we're going to take a slight tangent here to talk about exactly what up and down mean in the context of an ECG. So let's talk about up and down in an ECG, right? If an impulse goes up in a particular lead, it means it's coming towards you in that lead. If it goes down, it means it's traveling away from you. So that means you need to know what direction the leads are actually facing. On the screen you can see a diagram of the heart and the direction of all the leads. So if an impulse is going from the atrium down towards the ventricle, in lead 2 it's going from negative to positive, so it'll be an upward curve. So if the P-wave is generated by the SA node and travels down towards the AV node, that's going to be a positive curve because it's going from negative to positive. But let's say the P-wave is generated by something else, right? If it's generated by the AV node, then what's going to happen is the P-wave is going to spread outward, right? So you'll have a negative P-wave coming up. Or if it comes from the ventricle down here, I'll have to go from ventricle up, right? So it'll be going from positive towards negative, so again you'll have a negative P-wave. So general rule of thumb, if the impulse for the P-wave, if the pacemaker is located above this line over here, above the AV node, then your P-wave is generally going to be upright. If it is located below the AV node, your P-wave is generally going to be downward. Now question 3 is whether or not there's a one-to-one relationship between the P-wave and the QRS complex. What that means is 2 things. Each P-wave must be followed by a QRS complex. You shouldn't have a P-wave that doesn't cause a QRS complex to follow it. You shouldn't have a P-wave with no QRS complex. That already means there's a problem. And it also means that there shouldn't be a QRS complex which is generated without having a P-wave coming before it. So if you see a QRS complex that has no P-wave coming before it, that also means there's a problem. So question 4 is about whether the P-wave is regular or not. So if all the P-waves in a given lead, in this case standard lead 2, look the same, have the same morphology and there's a constant distance between them, assume there's a constant distance between them, I can't draw this accurately, right? Then, you can say that the p-waves all come from the same source because they all look the same distance, regular rhythm, they all come from the same source. But if the p-waves look different, so one p-wave is upright, then one's down, then one is double, then one's up and down, then these p-waves are coming from different sources because they're coming from different directions, hence the different morphology. So we need to know is the p-wave regular? Is there one consistent source throwing out every p-wave, or are p-waves coming from different sources? Since we're talking about Pwave morphology in question 4, let's go through some Pwave morphologies you might actually see from the SA node. Right? We'll start off with normal. So normal is that. Right? That's a normal SA node Pwave in standard lead 2. Right? Now, if there is right atrial enlargement, you can actually see that in the Pwave. So because the SA node sits in the right atrium, you'll get a large peak first and then a smaller peak that's slightly delayed when it hits the left atrium. We call that a P pulmonale. Right? And that is indicative of right atrial enlargement. And because the right atrium gets the impulse slightly earlier, you see the peak is earlier, then it goes back down to normal for the left atrium. What happens if the left atrium is enlarged? Right? Then you'll see something that looks like this. You'll see a normal P-wave and then a double bump coming out like that. We call that a P mitrale. And what that means is that in the initial part of the P-wave, when it hits the right atrium, everything is normal. Then it gets the left atrium, and it gets the left atrium later because the left atrium is larger, so it takes longer to go across the entire atrium. And so P mitrale is a sign of left atrial enlargement. And what happens if both atria are enlarged? If both atria are enlarged, you're going to see something that looks like this. You'll see a P pulmonale increase, and then you'll see a larger increase there for the P mitrale. So both atria enlarged. So you'll see that if you were in P pulmonale, you'd have a peak here, and then it would drop. Right? So abnormal right atrium, normal left atrium. Normal right atrium, abnormal left atrium. But here in this one, you've got an abnormal right atrium and an abnormal left atrium. Right? And these are the typical things that you'll see from a P-wave generated by the SA node, if it's normal or it's abnormal. If you see a different morphology that doesn't look like this, it's likely that the SA node is not the one generating that P-wave. To recap, so far we've asked 4 questions. 1. Is there a P-wave? 2. Is the P-wave upright in standard lead 2? 3. Is there a one-to-one relationship between the P-wave and the QRS complex? And 4. Is the P-wave regular in terms of morphology? If you can answer yes to all 4 of these questions, it's very likely the P-wave came from the sinoatrial node. In the last episode we showed you how to begin the ECG description statement, and today we'll add on what we've learned today. So when analyzing an ECG, you begin with this ECG shows a regular or an irregular rhythm with a rate of whatever you calculate the rate to be, and then you go on to the P-wave. So this ECG shows a regular or irregular rhythm with a rate of whatever it is, with a P-wave that is upright in standard lead 2, with a one-to-one relationship to the QRS complex and a regular morphology. And that's the statement so far. We'll get on more in the next episode. And that's it for episode 2. Next time we'll be discussing the PR interval, so be sure not to miss that. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you again next time.